In the land of Anara, where the skies stretched endlessly and rivers hummed soft songs, there stood an ancient Baobab tree. This tree, older than anyone could remember, was said to hold the secrets of the world. It was here that the elders often gathered to share stories under the calm glow of the moon. Stories that danced through the night and soothed listeners to sleep. One quiet night, Mama Esther, the village elder, sat beneath the tree with a small group. She began, "Before the stars were born, the night was an empty canvas. It was there that the spirits of light and shadow danced, creating the moon and stars." Her voice, warm and steady, carried the listeners to a time when the world was still being formed. As she spoke, the leaves rustled gently, like whispers adding life to her words. In the beginning, the spirits argued. Light wanted to rule, but shadow refused to bow. So the great creator separated them. Light ruled the day, and shadow ruled the night. But their longing to meet gave birth to dusk and dawn. Mama Esther's words lingered, filling the night with wonder. Far from the village, a young hunter named Favor set out on a journey to find the legendary river of reflection. It was said that whoever looked into its waters could see their true purpose. Favor, guided by the stars, walked through forests, crossed valleys, and faced whispers of unseen spirits. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she met an old man carving wood by a fire. The man, with eyes sharp like an eagle's, said, "The river you seek is guarded by a serpent with eyes that see through souls. To reach it, you must face your greatest fear." Favor bowed respectfully and continued her journey, carrying the old man's words like a charm. Favor reached the river at dawn, its waters shimmering like silver. But before she could step closer, a giant serpent slithered from the reeds. Its emerald eyes locked onto her. "Who dares disturb my waters?" it hissed. Favor, though shaking inside, said, "I seek my truth." The serpent coiled and said, "Truth is not given, it is earned. Face the shadows within, and the river will grant you clarity." Thus began Favor's test, a journey inward to confront the fears and doubts that had followed her like shadows. Thus began Favor's test, a journey inward to confront the fears and doubts that had followed her like shadows. After facing her fears, Favor returned to the river, her heart lighter. The serpent stepped aside, and Favor gazed into the water. She saw visions of her past, present, and future. In the ripples, she discovered her purpose, not as a hunter, but as a storyteller who would carry wisdom to generations. Favor returned to her village, carrying stories of her journey. She sat beneath the Baobab tree, sharing tales that taught courage, hope, and patience. The villagers listened, enchanted, as the whispers of the tree seemed to echo her words. As the days passed, Favor's stories spread beyond the village. Travelers began arriving, drawn by the tales of wisdom whispered under the ancient Baobab tree. One day, a young woman named Zina approached Favor, carrying a bundle of herbs and a quiet strength in her eyes. "I have heard your stories," Zina said softly, "but I come seeking answers the river could not give me." Favor smiled and gestured for Zina to sit. "Then perhaps your answers lie not in water but in the wind." Zina's journey began with a quest to heal the sick, but whispers of shadows in the forest threatened her path. With Favor's guidance, she prepared to face what lay ahead, trusting in the stories that had already healed so many hearts. Zina set out at dawn, carrying her herbs and prayers. The forest loomed ahead, alive with murmurs and rustling leaves. As she walked, the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches forming patterns that felt like messages. She paused and whispered, "Great spirits, guide me." Suddenly, the wind carried a soft voice, "Trust the unseen, for what is hidden protects what is sacred." Zina pressed forward, her heart steady, as she followed the gentle voice through winding paths. By sunset, she arrived at a clearing where a wounded bird lay. Kneeling beside it, she placed her herbs and murmured words of healing. The bird stirred, and as its wings fluttered, the shadows around her seemed to lift. Returning to the village, Zina shared her tale, and the villagers marveled at how the wind had guided her. Favor nodded. The forest spoke because you listened. And so, Xena began her journey as the village healer, carrying the whispers of the wind to all who sought comfort. With Xena's healing touch spreading hope, the village faced a new challenge: drought. The river dried up, and the crops withered. Favor and Xena gathered the villagers under the Baobab tree. "We must work together," Xena said. "Unity is our greatest strength." Favor and Xena led a group to seek help from distant lands. Their journey tested their resolve as they faced harsh deserts and dangerous paths. Along the way, they discovered an ancient guardian who demanded a sacrifice to reveal the secret of restoring water. Through courage and unity, the villagers passed the guardian's trial. They returned with seeds and knowledge that revived the land. Rain fell, and the Baobab tree stood taller than ever, its branches spreading hope. One evening, dark clouds rolled in, not from the sky, but in the form of strangers from the east. They came with carts laden with metal and leather, their faces hidden beneath hoods. The village children ran to their homes, and the elders gathered beneath the Baobab tree, whispering prayers for protection. The leader of the strangers stepped forward, his voice as cold as the steel of his spear. "This land is rich, and we claim it now. Leave or face the wrath of the east." Favor stepped out from the crowd, her voice steady but firm. "We have faced drought, famine, and storms. We will face this too. This land is our home. The roots of the Baobab run deep, and so do we." The strangers laughed, their leader sneering. "Your stories cannot stop us. Words are weak. Steel is strong." Xena stepped forward next, holding a bundle of herbs in her hands. "Words have power. They have healed the broken and calmed storms. This tree has witnessed generations, and it will not fall to strangers." Her voice carried through the crowd, giving the villagers strength. The Baobab's leaves rustled, and the wind picked up, carrying whispers that seemed to echo Xena's words. The strangers hesitated, unnerved by the sudden gust of wind. Their leader narrowed his eyes. "You have until sunrise to decide. Yield, or we will take what we want." As the strangers retreated to their camp, the villagers gathered beneath the Baobab tree. Mama Esther raised her hands and spoke. "The spirits are stirring. The Baobab speaks. We must stand together, but we must also be wise. Prepare, for the storm is near." That night, as the villagers gathered under the Baobab tree, the wind howled through the branches, rattling the leaves like whispered warnings. A chill settled over the gathering, and Mama Esther's eyes darkened with concern. "The spirits are restless," she said, her voice trembling. "The strangers bring more than weapons. They bring deceit and shadows that cannot be seen. We must be wise and prepared." Favor and Xena stepped forward. "We cannot wait for them to strike," Favor said. "We must know their plans. Someone must go to their camp and learn their intentions." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Mama Esther nodded. "The spirits favor courage. Go, but be unseen. Take the wisdom of the Baobab with you." That night, Favor and Xena prepared for their dangerous task. Xena packed herbs to mask their scent, and Favor sharpened a small blade, just in case. As they slipped into the darkness, the Baobab's branches creaked as if bidding them farewell. They moved like shadows through the tall grass, guided by the whispers of the wind. The strangers' camp flickered with firelight. Guards stood at the edges, but their laughter and chatter betrayed overconfidence. Favor crept closer, her heart pounding. Xena tugged at her sleeve, pointing to the leader's tent. "There," she whispered. Inside, the leader and his men spoke in hushed tones. "We attack at dawn," the leader said. "Their defenses are weak, but we do not just take their land, we take their trust. The one who speaks for them will break first. Without their faith, they will fall." Favor's breath caught. "They seek to turn us against each other," she whispered. Suddenly, footsteps approached the tent. Favor and Xena ducked behind barrels, holding their breaths. A guard paused nearby but then moved on. As soon as it was safe, the women fled, returning to the village before dawn. Breathless, Favor relayed the enemy's plans to the villagers. "They want to divide us. We must show them we cannot be broken. Mama Esther raised her hands to the sky. The Baobab roots run deep, so must our trust. Prepare the defenses and guard your hearts. The villagers set up watch posts, fortified their homes, and vowed to stand united against the storm that was coming. Dawn broke with an eerie silence, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The villagers wasted no time. Men drove sharpened stakes into the ground while women wove nets and traps from vines. Children gathered stones and lined them along the paths. The air buzzed with urgency, but fear lingered beneath their determined faces. Favor and Zena moved among them, offering words of encouragement. "Stay focused," Favor said. "They may have numbers, but we have unity." Zena tended to those who trembled, rubbing calming herbs on their foreheads. "Fear is natural," she told them, "but trust in the spirits, and they will guide us." Scouts returned near midday, their faces pale. "The strangers have doubled in number," one said, "and their leader has brought a war drum. They mean to strike hard." A murmur swept through the villagers. Mama Esther raised her voice. "Calm your hearts. Let fear be the fire that sharpens your resolve. The Baobab has stood for centuries, and so shall we." As night fell, the strangers' campfires glowed like angry eyes beyond the horizon. The distant thud of their drums began, echoing like thunder in the villagers' chests. Favor climbed to the highest point in the village and raised her voice. "We are not alone. The spirits of our ancestors walk with us. Let their courage fill your hearts." Suddenly, a scout stumbled into the village, bleeding from a wound on his shoulder. "They sent spies," he gasped. "We fought them back, but more will come." Zena immediately began tending to his wound, her fingers steady despite the trembling in her heart. Favor clenched her fists. "They test us, but they will see we are stronger than they believe. No more hiding. Let them know we are ready. Light the torches." Flames lit up the night as villagers lined the borders of their home. The Baobab's leaves shivered in the wind, and Mama Esther stepped forward. "Tonight, the spirits watch. Stand together, and no shadow will break us." As the drumming grew louder, the villagers tightened their grips on weapons and tools. The storm had arrived, and they would face it, not with fear, but with fire in their hearts. The first clash came just before dawn. The strangers from the east crept toward the village under the cover of fog, their torches flickering like restless spirits. But the villagers were ready. At the edge of the village, hidden nets and traps snapped shut, ensnaring the first wave of invaders. Cries rang out as the intruders stumbled, falling into pits covered with branches. Favor, standing at the front with a spear in her hand, shouted, "Hold the line!" The villagers, armed with sharpened sticks and stones, surged forward, pushing back the attackers. Zena moved swiftly, tending to the wounded. Her hands glowed faintly as she rubbed healing herbs into cuts and bruises. "Stay strong," she whispered to a frightened young boy. "We fight not just for today, but for tomorrow." The strangers regrouped and charged again, this time with greater force. Their leader raised a horn and blew a sharp, piercing note. More warriors poured in, overwhelming the villagers' defenses. Mama Esther stepped forward, raising her staff toward the Baobab tree. "Spirits of the earth, stand with us." The wind howled, and the leaves of the Baobab began to shake violently. Dust and debris spun through the air, blinding the attackers. The villagers took advantage of the chaos, driving the strangers back once more. But just as hope surged, a sharp cry pierced the air. One of the eastern warriors had broken through the defenses and set fire to the huts. Flames crackled, and panic spread through the village. Favor turned to Zena. "Go to the children and elders. Get them to safety. We'll hold them off here." Zena nodded and ran toward the center of the village, gathering the vulnerable and leading them toward the Baobab tree. "Stay together. The tree will protect us." Favor faced the advancing enemy, her heart pounding. She gripped her spear tighter and shouted, "For the Baobab! For Anara!" The villagers echoed her cry, their voices rising above the chaos. The battle had only just begun. The storm raged on as rain poured from the heavens, quenching the flames but turning the earth into thick mud. Favor's arms ached from wielding her spear, yet she pressed forward, her eyes locked on the stranger's leader. He swung his blade in wide arcs, forcing Favor to dodge and counter with swift strikes. "You fight well for a storyteller," the leader growled, his voice thick with disdain. "But stories cannot save your people. Stories have saved us before, and they will save us now," Favor replied, blocking another strike. She feinted to the side and swept his legs out from under him. The man hit the mud with a grunt, but before Favor could finish him, more warriors surged toward her. Xena reappeared at Favor's side, her hands stained with herbs and blood. "We have to fall back to the Baobab tree. The children and elders are safe, but the huts are burning again. We can't hold them here." Favor hesitated, her eyes darting to the villagers still locked in battle. "We can't abandon them." Mama Esther's voice rang out from behind them. "To the tree. The spirits will shelter us. Regroup and defend the heart of the village." Reluctantly, Favor signaled the retreat. The villagers fell back in waves, covering one another as they moved toward the Baobab tree. The strangers gave chase, their war cries echoing through the rain. When they reached the tree, Mama Esther raised her staff and drove it into the mud. The ground trembled, and the wind picked up, forming a wall of dust and leaves that slowed the attackers. "This tree holds more than roots," Mama Esther said. "It holds the strength of our ancestors. Stand your ground." The villagers formed a circle around the tree, their weapons raised. The strangers hesitated, unnerved by the swirling winds and the glow emanating from the baobab's roots. Favor stepped forward, her spear pointed at the leader, who had regained his footing. "You've seen our strength," she said. "Leave now, and your lives will be spared." The leader's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he raised his blade once more. "We do not run from the shadows." Before he could charge, the baobab's roots trembled, and a deep, echoing voice seemed to rise from the earth itself. "Enough!" The sound sent shivers through the attackers, who staggered back in fear. The villagers tightened their circle, their courage renewed. The storm was far from over, but the baobab had spoken, and its whispers carried power. The ground shook violently as the baobab's roots twisted and rose like serpents. The strangers stumbled, fear flashing in their eyes as the earth groaned beneath them. Favor lifted her spear. "The spirits defend us. Fight with courage." Rain poured harder as villagers charged forward, pushing back the attackers. Xena knelt at the base of the tree, whispering prayers and scattering herbs. "Ancestors, lend us strength. Shield your children." The roots glowed faintly, pulsating with energy, driving fear deeper into the hearts of the enemies. The leader of the strangers hesitated but roared, "Hold your ground. Fear is their weapon. Do not falter." Yet cracks of doubt rippled through his men as the earth shifted beneath them. The battle raged on. The villagers fought fiercely, their courage strengthened by the baobab's energy. Spears clashed, and cries filled the air as the rain fell in sheets. The roots of the tree moved like living vines, pushing back enemies and trapping those who faltered. Favor spotted the leader of the strangers battling his way toward Mama Esther. She sprinted through the chaos, her spear raised high. "No more!" she shouted, blocking his strike just before it reached the elder. The leader growled, "You cannot stop what has begun." Favor stepped closer, her voice steady. "This ends now. Your fear poisons your heart. Leave, or the spirits will bury you where you stand." The earth trembled again, and the roots encircled the leader's feet. His men, seeing their leader bound, began to retreat. Cries of surrender echoed through the battlefield. Mama Esther raised her hands. "Let them go. Let their fear teach them." The villagers lowered their weapons, allowing the defeated strangers to flee into the storm. As the rain slowed, the villagers gathered under the baobab, their bodies weary but their spirits unbroken. Mama Esther looked at Favor and Xena. "This was only the beginning. The baobab has awakened, and its whispers will guide us in the battles yet to come. As the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, the villagers stood in silence under the baobab tree. Smoke still rose from the burnt huts, their charred frames standing like dark shadows against the morning light. The ground was soaked, muddy from rain and blood, yet a calmness had settled over the village, a fragile peace. Favor stepped forward and placed her hand on the tree's trunk, its rough bark grounding her. Her voice trembled, yet her words rang clear. We did not stand alone. The spirits fought with us, and we have shown the world that unity is stronger than fear. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she did not hide them. Zena moved among the wounded, her hands steady even as exhaustion weighed down her body. She pressed healing herbs onto a man's bruised arm and whispered, "You'll be fine. Rest." Her fingers brushed the forehead of a frightened child, offering a soft smile. "The land will heal," she said, her voice carrying both comfort and conviction. "And so will we." Mama Esther stood near the tree's roots, her staff planted firmly in the ground. The villagers gathered as she raised her voice. "Today we rebuild, not just our homes, but our hearts. Let the stories of this night remind us that courage and faith will always light the way. But let us not forget the cost of this peace. Let us honor those who fell. Their spirits live on in the whispers of this tree." A wave of emotion swept through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children tightly, and men bowed their heads in silent gratitude. Tears mixed with rainwater on weary faces as they mourned the losses yet gave thanks for their survival. Suddenly, a faint sound came from the distance. It was the horn of the strangers, but this time it was not a call to battle. Instead, it sounded mournful, a sign of surrender. Favor's grip on her spear tightened, but Mama Esther raised her hand. "We have won more than victory today. We have shown mercy. Let their horn carry our message of peace." The villagers began moving, some to gather wood and stones for rebuilding, others to clear the wreckage of war. Children picked up fallen feathers and leaves blown by the storm, adding them to the roots of the baobab as offerings to the spirits. Zena knelt beside the tree, her hands pressed to the earth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for guiding us, for protecting us, for teaching us that even in the darkest night, there is light." Favor stood beside her, gazing out at the horizon. "This is not the end," she said softly. "The world will know our strength. The baobab has spoken, and its roots run deep. We will rise again, stronger, wiser, and unbroken." The days after the battle were filled with hard work and quiet determination. The villagers cleared the debris, stacking broken wood and stones into neat piles. New huts began to rise, and the scent of freshly turned soil filled the air as fields were replanted. Mama Esther stood at the foot of the baobab tree, overseeing the work. "This village was nearly taken from us," she said, "but we have reclaimed it. Let the roots of this tree remind us that even in storms, we stand firm." Zena prepared mixtures of herbs and oils, tending to those who still carried wounds. "Healing takes time," she told a worried mother whose child limped from a twisted ankle. "But the body remembers how to mend itself, just as the earth does. Trust in its strength." Favor watched as the villagers rebuilt their homes, her heart heavy yet hopeful. She climbed the baobab tree and looked out over the village. "We are not the same people who faced the storm," she whispered to the wind. "We are stronger now. The spirits tested us, and we proved worthy." That evening, the villagers gathered under the baobab tree once more. Mama Esther raised her staff. "Tonight we do not mourn. We celebrate. We honor those who fought and those who fell. We tell their stories so they will live forever." Favor stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Let the stories of this night remind us that we are bound not by blood alone, but by courage, sacrifice, and hope. Just as the baobab stands tall, so shall we." The villagers cheered, their voices echoing through the night. Drums began to beat, and soon the air was filled with music and laughter. Children danced, and elders clapped their hands, their hearts lighter than they had been in days. Zena approached Favor, her eyes shining. "The spirits are at peace," she said. "And so are we." Favor smiled. "This is only the beginning. The Baobab still has many stories to tell." The village had begun to heal, but the Baobab tree's whispers did not rest. One evening, as the wind hummed through its branches, Mama Esther called Favor and Zena to the tree. "Listen," she said. "The spirits are restless again. They speak of shadows beyond the hills and voices long forgotten." Favor touched the bark, and a chill ran through her fingers. "What do they say?" Mama Esther's eyes darkened. "They warn of a path hidden in mist, guarded by secrets that have waited too long to be uncovered. A journey must be taken, or the roots of the tree will wither." Zena looked at the villagers, who had just begun to find peace. "But we've only just rebuilt. How can we leave them?" "Because the spirits have called us," Favor said firmly. "And when the spirits call, we answer." The next morning, the villagers gathered around as Favor, Zena, and Mama Esther prepared for their journey. Mama Esther carried her staff, Zena packed her herbs, and Favor took the spear that had defended their home. The Baobab's branches bent low, almost as if blessing them. As they stepped beyond the village, the wind carried whispers that seemed to guide their steps. They followed a narrow path through dense forests, where the trees grew so close that daylight barely touched the ground. Strange markings appeared on rocks and leaves, symbols that seemed to move when no one was looking. Zena shivered. "I feel like we're being watched." Mama Esther tapped her staff against the ground. "Fear is a shadow. Walk in the light of the spirits, and no shadow will harm you." They reached a clearing where a circle of stones stood. The air felt heavy, and the earth hummed beneath their feet. In the center of the stones lay a pool of water, dark and still. Favor knelt beside it. "The river of reflection," she whispered. "But why here?" She touched the water, and ripples spread outward, revealing faint images. Faces, places, and battles yet to come. Zena gasped. "It's showing us the future. But what does it mean?" Before anyone could answer, the ground trembled, and a voice echoed through the clearing. "You seek answers, but answers demand sacrifice. Step forward, or turn back now." Favor stood. "We step forward. Always." With the village rebuilding, new whispers began to emerge from the Baobab tree. Stories of distant lands, hidden dangers, and long-forgotten prophecies stirred curiosity and fear. Favor, Zena, and Mama Esther prepared for a new journey, one that would test their bonds, reveal ancient secrets, and challenge their faith like never before. The clearing fell silent after the voice's warning. Favor stood firm, her heart pounding but steady. "We step forward. Always." Mama Esther raised her staff. "The spirits have called us. Let their guidance light the way." Zena hesitated, her fingers brushing the herbs tied at her waist. "What if this is a test? What if we are walking into a trap?" Favor placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we face it together. We have come too far to turn back." As they stepped into the circle of stones, the ground trembled again. The pool of water shimmered, and shadows rose from its surface. Figures emerged, tall, cloaked beings with hollow eyes that glowed faintly. Their voices echoed in unison. "Who dares disturb the balance?" Favor stepped forward, her voice strong. "We seek the truth. We seek the path to protect our people." The shadows shifted, their forms flickering like candle flames. "Truth demands sacrifice. Are you prepared to give what is most precious?" Mama Esther raised her staff. "We give only what the spirits ask. No more, no less. Speak, and we shall answer." One shadow moved closer. "Beyond this circle lies the path of shadows. Only those who face their past and carry their burdens may pass. Step into the mist, and let the truth shape your fate." The mist thickened, curling around their feet. Favor looked at Zena and Mama Esther. "Stay close. Trust each step." As they entered the mist, the world grew quiet. The air felt heavy, and strange whispers brushed their ears. Voices of doubt, fear, and regret. Zena gripped Favor's arm. "They're speaking to me. They know my fears." "Ignore them," Favor said. They feed on weakness. Keep walking. Suddenly, the mist parted, revealing a fork in the path. One side was lined with jagged stones, the other with smooth earth. The shadows whispered again. Choose wisely. One path leads to truth, the other to ruin. Mama Esther looked at the paths and closed her eyes. The spirits will guide us. After a long silence, she pointed to the rocky path. The harder road is often the right one. Without hesitation, they stepped forward, the mist swirling behind them as the shadows watched. The rocky path felt endless. Each step seemed to echo against unseen walls, and the mist pressed close, blurring their vision. Favor gripped her spear, her knuckles white. "Keep moving," she whispered. "The spirits are watching." Xena stumbled on a jagged stone and cried out. Favor rushed to her side. "Are you hurt?" Xena shook her head but clutched her herbs tightly. "It's not the pain. It's the whispers. They won't stop. They're calling my name. They know my secrets." Mama Esther leaned on her staff. "They know all of us. This path was built to test what lies in our hearts. Stand strong, Xena. Let the spirits know your courage." The mist shifted, revealing a wall covered in carvings. Each symbol pulsed faintly as if alive. Mama Esther traced one with her fingers. "This is no ordinary place. These marks tell stories. Stories of those who walked this path before us." Favor stepped closer. "What happened to them?" Before anyone could answer, the carvings began to glow brighter, and the air turned heavy. A voice echoed through the mist. "Truth demands pain. Face what lies hidden, or turn back now." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a chasm opened before them. Favor stepped to the edge and saw images swirling in the depths. Visions of her failures, fears, and regrets. "No!" Xena cried. "I can't do this. I can't face what's in there." Mama Esther touched her shoulder. "We face it together." She raised her staff, and the carvings glowed brighter. "Let the spirits guide us through the shadows." Favor gripped Xena's hand, and together they stepped forward into the light that poured from the chasm. As the mist swallowed them, the whispers grew louder, and the shadows of their past began to take shape. The mist wrapped around them like a living thing, twisting and shifting as if it had a mind of its own. Favor held Xena's hand tightly as they stepped further into the chasm's glow. Mama Esther's staff tapped against the stone floor, the sound echoing eerily in the silence. Xena trembled. "I can't see anything ahead. What if we're walking into a trap?" Favor's voice was steady. "We keep going. The spirits brought us here for a reason. We trust the path." Suddenly, the mist thinned, revealing a vast chamber carved from stone. At its center stood a pedestal with an ancient bowl filled with water that shimmered like liquid silver. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly. Mama Esther stepped forward and peered into the bowl. "This is no ordinary water. It's the pool of reflections. It reveals what is hidden, but not all who look survive its truth." Xena stepped back. "Survive? What do you mean?" "It will show you your fears, your regrets, and your failures," Mama Esther said. "But if your heart is strong, it will also show you hope." Favor stepped forward, her reflection rippling in the water. As she leaned closer, the surface stirred, showing images. Her past battles, her doubts, and faces of the villagers she feared letting down. Her chest tightened, but she did not look away. Xena hesitated, then approached the pool. Images swirled. Her struggles as a healer, her fear of losing those she loved, and shadows that whispered her failures. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm not strong enough." Favor gripped her shoulder. "You are stronger than you know. Look again. See the healer, the protector, and the light that guides others." Xena stared deeper, and this time she saw herself standing tall, healing the wounded and saving lives. Her shoulders straightened. "I see it. I see my strength." The water calmed, and the mist began to clear. Mama Esther smiled. "You have faced the truth and found courage. The spirits have blessed us. But this is only the beginning. Greater trials await." They turned toward a doorway that appeared in the far wall, its frame lined with glowing symbols. Favor raised her spear. Then let's face them together. The doorway loomed before them, its glowing symbols pulsing faintly. Favor stepped closer, her spear at the ready. What lies beyond this door? Mama Esther traced her fingers along the carvings. This is an ancient seal, guarded by the spirits. It will open only to those who are ready to face what it protects. She paused, her voice heavy. Or what it hides. Xena swallowed hard. What if we're not ready? Favor turned to her, her eyes steady. Then we prepare ourselves now. We face our fears, just as we did before. Whatever waits for us, we face it together. Mama Esther raised her staff, and the carvings flared with light. The door rumbled, then slowly opened, revealing a dark tunnel lined with more symbols. A faint hum echoed through the passage. They stepped inside, the air thick and cool. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and faint whispers drifted through the space. Xena shivered. They're watching us. I can feel it. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the symbols flared brighter. A shadow moved ahead, taking shape as a tall figure cloaked in darkness. Its voice echoed in the chamber. You have come seeking truth, but truth is not given, it is earned. Prove your worth, or be consumed by the shadows. Favor gripped her spear. We are not afraid of shadows. We have faced them before, and we will face them again. The figure raised a staff of its own, and the chamber shook. Then face me, and let the spirits judge your strength. Mama Esther stepped forward. The spirits do not judge alone. We stand with them, and we will not fall. The air grew heavy as the figure's shadow stretched toward them, and the trial began. The chamber darkened as the figure raised its staff, and shadows swirled around them like smoke. Favor planted her feet firmly. We are not afraid, she shouted. The figure's voice boomed. Prove it. Face what lies within. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, forming shapes, mirrors of their deepest fears. Xena gasped as she saw herself failing to save the wounded, her herbs crumbling to dust. Favor saw herself alone. The village burned, her stories forgotten. Mama Esther's reflection showed the Baobab tree withering, its branches bare. No, Favor roared. This is not our truth. We are stronger than these fears. Xena stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. I am a healer. I bring life, not failure. The shadows hissed and recoiled. Mama Esther raised her staff, light pouring from its tip. We are guided by the spirits. Darkness cannot hold us. The chamber shook, and the shadows began to dissolve. The figure lowered its staff. You have faced the darkness and proven your strength. The path is open. The chamber settled into an eerie calm as the figure lowered its staff. The air, thick with tension, began to clear. Favor, Xena, and Mama Esther stood firm, their breaths heavy but steady. The shadowed figure stepped closer, revealing its face, aged and carved with deep lines. Its eyes glowed faintly, filled with ancient wisdom. You have passed the trial, but your journey is far from over. The truth you seek is deeper than the surface. Are you prepared to walk further into the unknown? Favor nodded. We have come this far. We will not turn back. The figure extended its hand, and the walls shimmered, revealing carvings of battles, kingdoms, and forgotten gods. This place was built to protect what must never be forgotten. The truth of your people, their rise, their fall, and the promise they made to the spirits of this land. Xena stepped closer to the carvings, tracing the symbols. These are stories, she whispered. Stories lost to time. The figure's voice softened. And stories are power, but power without wisdom destroys. That is why the spirits chose you. A healer, a storyteller, and a guide. Together, you must restore what was broken. Mama Esther bowed her head. We will do as the spirits command. But what lies beyond this chamber? The figure turned toward a new passage, hidden until now. The path ahead will test not only your courage but your unity. Trust each other, and trust the whispers of the Baobab. The spirits have not abandoned you, they have prepared you. Favor tightened her grip on her spear. Then we walk forward. Together, the passage stretched endlessly, its walls lined with carvings of eyes that seemed to follow their every step. Zena's fingers brushed the rough stone. "They're watching us," she whispered. Mama Esther raised her staff, and light glowed faintly at its tip. "Let them watch. We walk with purpose. Fear cannot hold us." Deeper into the tunnel, whispers filled the air. Favor paused, straining to listen. "Do you hear that? It's like voices calling out." The whispers grew louder, forming words. "Turn back. Leave this place. The past cannot save you." Favor gritted her teeth. "The past is why we're here. We will not turn back." Suddenly, the ground rumbled, and shadows poured from the carvings, swirling into forms that blocked their path. Mama Esther stepped forward. "We face you not with weapons, but with truth. Let the spirits judge us." The shadows hesitated, and Zena clutched her herbs. "Together we stand, and we do not fear you." The shadows hesitated, but their presence did not fade. Favor gripped her spear tightly as the air around them grew heavier. "The spirits are testing us again," she said, her voice firm. "We must face them with truth." Mama Esther stepped forward, raising her staff high. "We are children of this land, born under its skies and nourished by its rivers. We come not to destroy, but to restore what was broken. Spirits of the past, hear us. We seek your guidance, not your wrath." The shadows twisted, and from their midst, a new figure emerged. It was taller, draped in ancient robes, and its face seemed carved from stone. "Who dares call upon the ancients?" Its voice echoed, deep and commanding. Favor stepped forward. "I am Favor, daughter of Anara. We seek the truth of our ancestors and the wisdom to protect our people. The Baobab called us here." We answered. The figure's glowing eyes studied her. "Truth is not given lightly. To claim it, you must honor the past and vow to protect the future. Are you prepared to bear this burden?" Favor nodded. "I am prepared. We all are." Zena clutched her herbs, her voice steady. "I will heal and protect those who cannot fight. My hands are ready to serve." Mama Esther planted her staff firmly. "I will guide and teach, so the stories never fade." The figure's gaze softened. "Then let the whispers guide you." The chamber trembled, and the carvings on the walls glowed brighter, illuminating hidden symbols. "The path ahead will not be easy. Shadows will rise, and truths will shake the earth beneath you. But remember, the roots of the Baobab run deep. Trust them. Trust each other." With those words, the shadows dissolved, and the path cleared. Favor turned to the others. "This is not the end. It's only the beginning." The group stepped through the cleared path, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The chamber ahead was vast, its walls covered in shimmering symbols and carvings of animals, stars, and spirals that seemed to pulse with life. Mama Esther paused at the entrance. "This is the heart of the ancients," she whispered. "We have reached the place where the spirits speak most clearly." Zena clutched her herbs, her hands trembling. "I can feel the energy here. It's like the earth itself is alive." Favor stepped forward and knelt before the largest carving, a great tree whose roots stretched into the earth and whose branches touched the heavens. "This is the Baobab. Its roots hold the past, and its branches reach for the future." She placed her palm on the carving, and the room trembled. A deep hum filled the air, and the carvings began to glow brighter. The voices of the ancients echoed through the chamber. "You have come seeking truth. Now you must become its keepers. What you learn here must be carried to those who will follow. The balance of the world depends on it." Suddenly, light burst from the carvings, and images danced across the walls. Visions of war, unity, betrayal, and hope. Zena gasped as she saw herself healing the sick and guiding the wounded. Favor saw herself standing beneath the Baobab, surrounded by listeners hanging on her every word. Mama Esther saw herself teaching the next generation, passing down wisdom. The voice continued, "The shadows will rise again, but so will the light. The Baobab's roots are strong, but they must be guarded. Will you take this oath?" Favor stood. We will guard it with our lives. We will carry its stories and protect its roots. Xena and Mama Esther stepped beside her, raising their hands. We vow to honor the spirits, heal the broken, and guide the lost. The light faded, and the carvings dimmed, but a warmth filled the room. The spirits had accepted their vow. Favor turned to the others. This is where it begins, the awakening of the Baobab's keepers. As the light dimmed, the group stood in silence, absorbing the weight of their vow. Mama Esther broke the stillness. The ancients have spoken, but our journey is not complete. We must return to the village and prepare for what lies ahead. Xena packed her herbs, her eyes still glowing with determination. We will heal the broken, just as we promised. But we must also teach them to protect themselves. The shadows will rise again. Favor looked at the carvings one last time. And we will be ready. The Baobab's roots are deep, and so is our resolve. Let's carry this truth home. The journey back to the village was quiet but filled with purpose. The forest, once shrouded in fear, now felt alive with hope. Birds sang, and the wind carried the whispers of the Baobab as if blessing their path. Favor led the group, her spear resting against her shoulder. We return not as wanderers but as keepers of truth, she said. This is only the beginning. Xena gathered herbs along the way, preparing for the healing that awaited them. The village needs us, she said, and we need them. Together, we'll rebuild and grow stronger. Mama Esther raised her staff. The spirits walk with us. Their stories will live through us. Let this be our promise. When the group returned, the villagers welcomed them with open arms, but Favor could sense their lingering unease. The Baobab's whispers were faint, and the air carried a heaviness. Mama Esther addressed the crowd. We have returned not only with answers but with purpose. The spirits have chosen us to guard the roots of this land and prepare for what may come. Xena distributed herbs and remedies while Favor began teaching the villagers to fight and defend themselves. The children gathered under the Baobab as Favor told stories of courage, hope, and the journey they had taken. As night fell, the Baobab's leaves rustled again, stronger this time. Mama Esther smiled. The spirits are with us, and we are ready. The villagers lit torches around the tree, singing songs of unity. Their voices rose like prayers, echoing through the night. Favor stood with Xena and Mama Esther, looking out at the faces filled with hope. This is our beginning, Favor said softly, and we will face whatever comes, together. The morning after the villagers' celebration, Favor stood at the base of the Baobab tree, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky, once clear and bright, was now streaked with gray clouds that moved unnaturally fast. Xena joined her, clutching a pouch of herbs. You feel it too, she said softly. Favor nodded. The wind carries whispers again. The shadows are stirring. Mama Esther approached, her staff tapping against the earth. The spirits warned us. The peace was never meant to last forever. But we are ready. She looked at the villagers who gathered near the tree, their faces filled with determination. Favor raised her voice. We have faced trials before, and we will face them again. Today we prepare not out of fear but out of strength. The shadows may rise, but so will we. The villagers divided into groups. Some reinforced the village walls, while others gathered food and water. Xena trained the healers, teaching them to mix stronger medicines and salves. Favor led the warriors, showing them new formations and strategies. As the sun dipped low, the Baobab's leaves rustled, and the whispers grew louder. Mama Esther closed her eyes. They are near, but so are the spirits. Stand firm. That night, torches lined the village as guards patrolled. Xena brewed potions, her hands steady despite her fear. Favor stood at the edge of the village, her spear glinting in the firelight. Let them come, she whispered. We are ready. The night stretched long and heavy. Dark clouds swirled above the village, and the air crackled with unseen energy. Favor patrolled the perimeter, her senses sharp. The Baobab's branches swayed, their whispers more urgent now. Xena emerged from her hut, her face pale but determined. The herbs are ready, but I need more time to finish the healing salves. Will the walls hold? Favor nodded. The walls will hold, but we must prepare for the worst. Have faith in the spirits. They have not abandoned us. Suddenly, a loud howl echoed through the forest, sending shivers down spines. Shadows flickered beyond the torches, and the villagers drew closer to one another. Mama Esther raised her staff. Fear not. We stand united. Let the shadows come. We are not alone. The warriors gripped their weapons, and the healers stood ready with potions. The night grew darker, and the storm began. The shadows surged, spilling from the forest like a living wave. The villagers braced themselves as dark forms emerged, tall, hooded figures with glowing eyes. Favor raised her spear. Hold the line. The warriors locked shields, forming a barrier. Xena and the healers stood behind them, ready with potions and bandages. Mama Esther lifted her staff, chanting words that echoed with power. The figures attacked, their movements swift and silent. Favor struck first, her spear piercing through the darkness. The form disintegrated, but more pressed forward. Don't let fear take hold, Favor shouted. Her voice carried above the sounds of battle, grounding the villagers as they pressed together. Swords clashed against shadowy limbs, and the warriors fought as one, their unity forming an unbreakable shield. Xena threw herbs into the fire, creating thick smoke that burned the shadows. "Stay near the flames," she cried. "The light weakens them." Her hands moved quickly, binding wounds and handing out salves to the wounded fighters. Her apprentices mimicked her movements, their fear dissolving as they focused on healing. The shadows retaliated, pressing harder. They clawed at the walls and surged toward the weaker parts of the village's defenses. Favor saw the breach and called out, "Reinforce the eastern wall." Quickly, Mama Esther raised her staff, her voice rising in song. The chant grew louder, vibrating through the earth. The Baobab's leaves trembled, and a gust of wind swept through the village, pushing the shadows back. "The spirits fight with us. Hold your ground." Mama Esther's voice boomed, and light erupted from her staff, casting away several advancing figures. Still, more shadows poured in. Favor leaped toward the breach, slicing through the enemy with swift strikes. She yelled to her warriors, "Focus your strength. The shadows feed on fear, but we feed on hope." Her words sparked determination, and the warriors pressed harder, forcing the shadows back. The Baobab tree seemed to pulse with energy, its branches glowing faintly. Xena looked up, gasping. "The tree is with us. Its roots are calling the spirits." Mama Esther pointed her staff toward the tree. "Let its strength guide us." The villagers began chanting with her, their voices rising above the chaos. The shadows faltered, their forms flickering. Favor seized the moment. "Push forward. Now!" The warriors surged ahead, breaking the enemy's lines and driving them toward the forest's edge. Smoke filled the air, and the cries of the shadows grew weaker. Xena threw another handful of herbs into the fire, and the flames roared higher. "They're retreating. Don't stop now." The Baobab's branches swayed wildly, and a final gust of wind swept through the village, scattering the last of the shadows. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the villagers. Favor lowered her spear, her arms trembling. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Esther stepped forward, her staff still glowing faintly. "The battle is won, but the war is not over. This was only the beginning." She looked at the villagers, their faces weary but determined. "We must rebuild and prepare. The shadows will return, but so will we." The sun rose over Anara, casting golden rays across the village. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the scent of ash and burnt herbs hung heavy. The villagers moved carefully, stepping over broken weapons and scattered remnants of the battle. Some carried the wounded to Xena, while others began clearing debris and repairing the walls. Favor stood at the edge of the village, her spear still in hand. Her eyes swept the horizon, searching for any signs of movement. Though the shadows had retreated, a weight lingered in her chest. The battle had been won, but she knew it was far from over. Xena approached, wiping sweat from her brow. The wounded are stable, but we lost 3. Her voice cracked, and she clenched her fists. I tried, but... Favor placed a hand on Xena's shoulder. You saved many more. Do not carry this burden alone. We will honor them and keep fighting. Mama Esther joined them, her staff glowing faintly as she surveyed the land. The spirits are restless. They whisper warnings even now. The shadows will rise again, but so will we. She turned to the villagers, raising her voice. Today we mourn the fallen. Tonight we rebuild. Tomorrow we rise stronger. The villagers gathered around the Baobab tree, lighting candles and placing flowers at its roots. Favor knelt, touching the bark. We are the keepers of this land. We will protect it no matter the cost. Xena added herbs to the fire, letting the fragrant smoke drift upward. Let this be a blessing, a call for healing and strength. May the spirits guide us. As night fell, the villagers joined hands, singing ancient songs under the Baobab. The leaves rustled, and the air grew warm, as if the spirits themselves had joined the circle. Favor stood, looking at the stars. The battle has ended, but the journey has only begun. Let us prepare, for the shadows may return, but we will be ready. The villagers gathered at the Baobab tree, lighting candles and placing flowers at its roots. Favor knelt, touching the bark. We are the keepers of this land. We will protect it no matter the cost. Xena added herbs to the fire, letting the fragrant smoke drift upward. Let this be a blessing, a call for healing and strength. May the spirits guide us. As night fell, the villagers joined hands, singing ancient songs under the Baobab. The leaves rustled, and the air grew warm, as if the spirits themselves had joined the circle. Mama Esther addressed the crowd. Our strength lies in our unity. The shadows may rise again, but we will face them together. The spirits stand with us, and so we must stand with each other. The villagers worked late into the night, repairing homes and walls. They planted new crops and rebuilt what had been lost. Favor looked around, her heart swelling with pride. This village is more than walls and homes. It is hope, courage, and unity. As long as we stand together, we will not fall. Xena approached, handing Favor a small carved token. For luck, she said with a smile. We'll need it. The first light of dawn broke over the village, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Favor stood by the Baobab tree, her fingers grazing its bark. She listened closely, hoping to catch the whispers of the spirits guiding her next steps. The air was still, but the leaves above her rustled faintly, as though stirred by invisible hands. She closed her eyes, allowing the sounds to wash over her. Memories of the battle flickered in her mind. The cries, the clash of weapons, and the desperate fight for survival. But now there was quiet, and with it came questions. What comes next? She whispered. What path do we follow? The bark beneath her fingertips seemed to hum softly, as if responding to her plea. She felt a warmth spread through her palm, and images formed in her mind. Visions of the village thriving, children laughing, and crops growing tall under the sun. Yet shadows lurked at the edges, reminding her that peace was fragile. Xena approached, her steps careful as she carried a bowl of herbal water. You're not the only one who couldn't sleep, she said, offering the bowl to Favor. Favor took a sip and let the coolness soothe her throat. I can't shake the feeling that this quiet is temporary. The spirits are still speaking, but their words are harder to hear. Xena knelt beside her, placing a hand on the roots of the tree. Then we must listen harder. We've come this far by trusting their guidance. We can't lose faith now. A sudden gust of wind stirred the branches, and both women looked up. The leaves shimmered as sunlight filtered through, and a low, echoing hum seemed to rise from the ground. Mama Esther appeared, leaning on her staff. The spirits never stop speaking, she said. It is we who sometimes fail to listen. But this, she gestured the tree. This is a sign. The Baobab is alive with power. It's reminding us that done. Favor nodded, determination lighting her eyes. Then we will keep listening, keep guarding this land, and keep preparing. Whatever lies ahead, we will face it together. Morning dew clung to the earth as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the hanging over the village. The Baobab tree is tall, its branches that only the chosen few could hear. Favor stood at its base, sharper, toward the horizon, where the mist seemed to thicken unnaturally. Mama Esther appeared beside her, leaning on her staff. "The not ordinary," she said quietly. "Voices. Warnings, perhaps, or memories long buried. We must tread carefully." Zena approached, clutching a bundle of her oils. An attack comes. She paused, her eyes scanning the mist, but something feels wrong. It's as if the mist is alive. Mama Esther nodded. "It is alive, Zena. The spirit moved where they we read here, preparing and gaps, leaving the gap stirred, parting slightly, as if responding to her call. Suddenly, shadows moved within the mist. Figures began to emerge, silent and hooded, their forms blending with the fog. Favor stepped forward, her spear raised. "Stay together. Do not break the circle." The villagers tightened their formation, torches lighting up the mist. Zena scattered herbs into the flames, sending fragrant smoke curling upward. "Let this cleanse the air and keep the spirits at bay," she whispered. One of the shadowed figures stepped closer, lowering its hood. It was an elder, his eyes glowing faintly. "We are the Watchers," he said, his voice echoing. "We come to test your hearts. Are you worthy of the Spirit's blessing, or will your fears consume you?" Mama Esther stepped forward. "We are keepers of this land, protectors of its roots and its future. We do not yield to fear. We welcome your test." The elder nodded, and the mist swirled, growing darker. "Then let the trial begin." The mist thickened, swirling around the villagers as the Watchers stepped closer. Favor tightened her grip on her spear and glanced at Zena, who sprinkled herbs into the flames, causing the smoke to spiral upward. The elder Watcher raised his hand, and the mist began to shift, forming shapes, figures from the villagers' pasts. Faces they recognized, both beloved and feared, emerged from the fog. "These are the shadows of your memories," the Watcher said. "They carry truths you must face. If you falter, the mist will consume you. But if you endure, the spirits will grant you strength." A woman stepped forward, tears streaming down her face as the image of her late husband appeared. "Kola, is it really you?" she whispered, reaching out. The mist figure spoke in Kola's voice. "Why did you let me die? You could have saved me." The woman fell to her knees, sobbing, but Mama Esther steadied her. "Do not let guilt blind you. Face the truth. Release the pain." Favor turned as a shadowy version of herself emerged. It sneered. "You failed them. You were supposed to lead, but instead you let fear control you." Her heart pounded, but she gritted her teeth. "I faced my fear and survived. I am stronger now. You are only a shadow." She thrust her spear through the figure, and it dissolved into the mist. Zena's hands shook as she faced a shadow of her mother, who had died in sickness. "You were supposed to heal me," the figure hissed. "You promised." Zena closed her eyes, tears falling. "I did everything I could. I loved you and I still do, but I will not carry this guilt any longer." The shadow vanished, leaving her breathless but stronger. The Watchers nodded. "You have faced the truth and held your ground. The spirits grant you their blessing. But beware, this is only the beginning. Darkness will test you again. Be ready." The mist began to fade, and the villagers stood together, weary but united. Favor looked at the sky, where the first rays of sunlight broke through. We are ready. The sun was high by the time the villagers began to recover from the trial. Though the mist had faded, its memory lingered, leaving a haunting stillness in its wake. Favor stood by the Baobab, watching the villagers as they worked to rebuild the outer walls and gather fresh supplies. Mama Esther joined her, resting a hand on her staff. They fought well, she said, but fear still lingers. It clings to them even now. Favor nodded. We need to remind them who they are: strong, brave, and united. The shadows tested us, but we endured. We must let this forge us, not break us. Zena approached, holding a bowl of freshly mixed herbs. The wounded are healing, but we're short on some supplies. I'll need to lead a small group to the forest to gather more. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. Favor turned to her. I'll come with you. The forest is still dangerous, and I won't let you face it alone. Mama Esther raised her staff. Go, but tread carefully. The shadows may have retreated, but they are never far. She looked to the Baobab. And take a blessing with you. The spirits will watch over you. Gathering a small group, Favor and Zena set out toward the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches thick and tangled. The air felt heavy, and every rustle of leaves made the villagers clutch their weapons. Zena stopped to gather herbs while Favor kept watch. This place feels different, Zena said softly, as if it's waiting. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. Favor raised her spear, motioning for silence. Shadows shifted between the trees, and a low growl rumbled nearby. Get behind me, Favor ordered. Zena clutched her herbs as figures emerged, wild, clawed creatures with glowing red eyes. Favor stepped forward, her voice steady. We will not fall here. Stand strong. The creatures circled, but the villagers held their ground. Favor's spear struck first, and the battle began. Flames from Zena's herbs sparked in the air, driving the creatures back as the group fought with all their strength. When the last creature fell, Favor looked at the villagers. We are not prey, we are protectors, and we will defend this land. The forest was eerily quiet as Favor and Zena led the group back to the village. The battle had left them exhausted, but there was no time to rest. The villagers awaited their return, their eyes filled with hope and fear. As they entered the clearing, the Baobab tree seemed to glow faintly under the fading sunlight. Mama Esther stood at its base, her staff raised. You have returned victorious, but the shadows have not vanished, she said. They linger, waiting for weakness. Favor stepped forward. We are not weak. We faced them and prevailed. But we need to strengthen our defenses before they rise again. The villagers murmured in agreement, but a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying whispers that only the elders could hear. Mama Esther's eyes darkened. The spirits are restless. There is more to come. We must prepare. Zena began tending to the wounded while Favor gathered the warriors. We need to scout the forest, Favor said. There may be more lurking beyond the trees. We can't wait for another attack. A young warrior named Ao stepped forward. I'll go with you. I've trained for this. Favor nodded, but Mama Esther raised her staff. Be cautious. The spirits warn of traps. Old magic left behind to test the brave. Trust in your instincts and your bond with the Baobab. The scouting party set out at dawn, moving swiftly through the underbrush. The forest seemed darker than before, its shadows stretching unnaturally. Favor gripped her spear tightly. Stay close. The forest remembers us. It may not welcome us back. Hours passed, and just as they reached the clearing where the last battle had taken place, they found strange markings carved into the trees. Zena ran her fingers along the symbols. These are warnings, she said, not from the shadows, but from those who came before us. Favor's chest tightened. What did they leave behind? And why does it feel like it's still watching us? The wind whispered again, and the leaves rustled as if answering her question. The past was not finished with them yet. The forest loomed dark and mysterious as Favor led the scouting party deeper into its shadows. The markings carved into the trees seemed to pulse faintly as though alive, and each step stirred unease in the group. "These carvings," Zena said, running her fingers over the grooves, "feel warm. It's like the trees remember something we cannot see." Ao, gripping his spear tightly, glanced around. "Then we must tread carefully. Whatever is left these marks may still be seen." As they moved forward, the air thickened, and the ground grew soft underfoot. Favor stopped suddenly. "Look there," she said, pointing to a clearing ahead. At its center stood a stone altar, cracked and covered in moss, yet humming faintly with energy. Mama Esther's words echoed in Favor's mind, warnings of traps and forgotten magic. She motioned for the group to remain behind as she approached the altar. The carvings on its surface matched those on the trees, spirals and symbols twisting into patterns that seemed to shift when touched. Favor traced one with her finger, and the stone shuddered. A low rumble filled the clearing as light seeped from the cracks in the stone. Zena rushed forward. "Favor, step back. It's waking up." But Favor couldn't move. Her feet felt rooted to the earth as voices rose around her, whispers carried by the wind. "The guardians have returned," the voices said. "But are they worthy?" A bright light exploded from the altar, and shadowy figures emerged from the trees, surrounding the group. The warriors raised their weapons, but Favor held up her hand. "Wait, they're not here to fight." One of the figures stepped forward, cloaked in mist. "You stand before the keepers of the old path," it said. "Prove your strength, or be consumed by the forest's memory." Favor raised her spear. "We are ready." The shadowy figures closed in, their movements soundless as mist. Favor gripped her spear tightly, her pulse quickening. Zena stood beside her, clutching a pouch of herbs, ready to act if needed. The tallest figure stepped forward, its voice echoing like the wind through trees. "Your courage is clear, but courage alone will not save you. This is the test of the keepers. To guard this land, you must prove your wisdom and strength. Are you prepared?" Favor stepped forward. "We are ready." Her voice rang with resolve, but uncertainty danced in her chest. The figure pointed to the altar, where the carvings glowed faintly. "You must unlock the heart of the stone, solve its riddle, or remain trapped within these woods forever." Zena knelt beside the altar, tracing the glowing symbols. "These patterns resemble the roots of the Baobab," she said, "intertwined, yet separate. It's a puzzle." Favor studied the carvings, recalling the stories Mama Esther had told of the tree's roots reaching deep, connecting the earth and sky. She began aligning the patterns, shifting the stones carefully. A deep hum vibrated through the air as the symbols began to align. The mist swirled, and the figures stepped back, watching silently. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Light shot from the altar, and the symbols locked into place. The tallest figure nodded. "You have passed the first trial, but one test remains. Enter the circle of truth and face what lies within." The mist parted, revealing a glowing circle etched into the earth. Favor turned to the others. "Stay here. This is my trial to face." Zena grabbed her arm. "You don't have to face it alone. We stand with you." Favor smiled. "You've stood with me this far. Trust me to finish this." She stepped into the circle, and the light enveloped her. Shadows twisted around her, taking shape, and the whispers grew louder. The trial had begun. The villagers gathered beneath the baobab tree as dusk settled, the fading light casting long shadows across the earth. Favor stood in the center, her spear planted firmly in the ground. "Tonight we prepare, not just our weapons, but our spirits. The shadows are watching, and we must be ready." Mama Esther stepped forward, her voice steady. "The spirits have tested us, and we have endured, but the final trial has not yet come. We must kindle the fire within us, for it is light that pushes back the darkness." Zena carried a clay bowl filled with herbs and oils, pouring them into the fire at the base of the tree. Smoke rose, carrying the scent of protection and cleansing. "Let this fire be our shield," she said. "Its flames will remind us that we do not stand alone." The villagers joined hands, singing ancient songs that carried strength and hope. Favor's eyes swept the circle, seeing faces filled with resolve. She felt the power of their unity, each voice rising as a beacon against the coming storm. Suddenly, a gust of wind stirred the flames, and the shadows at the edge of the clearing shifted. Mama Esther raised her staff. "They are near, but so are we. Hold the line." Favor gripped her spear and stepped toward the edge of the circle. "Tonight, we do not fear the dark. Tonight, we fight as one." The villagers raised their weapons and torches, their voices ringing out in defiance. The shadows pressed closer, but the fire blazed brighter, casting long beams of light into the darkness. Favor stood at the front, her heart steady. Whatever came, they would face it together. The night grew darker, and the wind howled through the trees, carrying whispers that chilled the villagers to the bone. Favor stood firm, her spear raised as the shadows crept closer. Xena scattered more herbs into the fire, and the flames roared higher, pushing the darkness back momentarily. "We can't let the fire die," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Mama Esther raised her staff, chanting words older than memory. The ground trembled, and the baobab's branches swayed, glowing faintly. "The spirits are with us. Hold your ground." The shadows lunged, their forms twisting and clawing at the light. The villagers fought back, their voices rising in chants and battle cries. Favor struck with precision, each blow driving the darkness back. Amid the chaos, a piercing cry echoed through the clearing. A shadow broke through the circle, heading straight for the baobab. Favor sprinted, her spear glowing as she leaped to intercept it. "Not today!" she shouted, plunging her weapon into the shadow. The light from the baobab flared, pushing the shadows back into the forest. The villagers stood panting, their faces streaked with sweat and soot. The night was silent once more, but Favor knew this was only the beginning. The first light of morning broke over the village, casting golden rays through the branches of the baobab tree. The villagers stood in silence, their faces weary but filled with hope. Smoke from the dying embers of the night's fire still lingered, mingling with the scent of herbs and earth. Favor leaned against her spear, her eyes scanning the horizon. The shadows had retreated, but their presence lingered in the corners of her mind. "This battle is won," she said softly, "but we cannot lower our guard." Mama Esther approached, placing a steady hand on Favor's shoulder. "No victory is without scars," she said, "but scars remind us of what we have survived. Today, we celebrate our resilience and plant the seeds of tomorrow." Xena stepped forward, her hands carrying a bowl of water infused with healing herbs. "We must cleanse the land," she said. "Let this water wash away the darkness and nurture new life." The villagers gathered, each taking turns sprinkling the water around the baobab's roots. Their voices rose in prayer, calling for protection and growth. As the water touched the earth, the tree's leaves shimmered, reflecting the sunlight. Children danced around the tree, their laughter echoing through the clearing. Elders shared blessings, and warriors laid down their weapons, if only for a moment. Favor knelt at the base of the tree, pressing her palm against its bark. "We stood united," she whispered, "and we will remain strong. No shadow will break us." The ground beneath her hummed softly, as if the tree itself had heard her vow. Mama Esther raised her staff, signaling the start of a new day. "This is not the end," she said. "It is the beginning of something greater. Let the whispers of the baobab guide us forward." And as the sun climbed higher, its rays fell upon a village reborn, one that stood not in fear of shadows but in the light of hope and unity. The village stirred with renewed energy as the morning unfolded. Children ran through the clearing, weaving between baskets of freshly gathered fruits, while the elders sat in circles, weaving mats and sharing quiet laughter. Favor and Xena walked together toward the baobab tree. "The land feels lighter," Xena said, clutching a bundle of herbs. "But I still sense something stirring beneath it all." Favor nodded, The shadows may be gone for now, but their roots run deep. We'll need to keep watching, listening. She knelt by the tree and whispered, "May your roots anchor us, and your branches shield us." The breeze that swept through the village carried a new energy, one that stirred both hope and unease. Favor stood by the baobab tree, her fingers brushing its bark. She turned to Zena. "The spirits are stirring again. Can you feel it?" Zena nodded. "It's as if the earth itself is shifting, preparing for something." Mama Esther approached, her staff tapping softly against the ground. "The wind carries messages, whispers of change," she said. "The spirits do not move without reason. We must prepare." Favor tightened her grip on her spear, scanning the horizon. "Then we won't wait for the change to catch us off guard. We'll be ready." As they spoke, a group of villagers emerged from the clearing, carrying baskets filled with supplies. Zena stepped forward, her voice steady. "We need to reinforce the outer fields. The earth feels unsettled, and we can't risk leaving the crops exposed." Mama Esther nodded. "Gather the others. Strengthen the barriers. Tonight we light the fires again and keep watch. The spirits may bring answers, but shadows often follow them." By dusk, the villagers had assembled around the baobab tree, their torches casting long shadows. Favor stood at the front, her voice ringing clear. "This village has faced the shadows before, and we have endured. Whatever this change brings, we will meet it as one people, strong and united." The villagers cheered, their voices echoing into the night. Mama Esther raised her staff, and the flames of the torches danced higher. "The winds have spoken. Tomorrow begins a new chapter, but tonight we stand watch." Night fell, and the fires blazed high, casting flickering shadows against the walls of the village. Favor walked the perimeter, her spear in hand, eyes scanning the dark forest beyond. Zena followed closely, her pouch of herbs clinking softly. "I keep feeling like something's watching us," she whispered. "It's not just you," Favor replied, her voice low. "The wind feels heavier tonight. The spirits are restless." Mama Esther appeared from the shadows, her staff glowing faintly. "The earth has shifted," she said. "I felt it beneath my feet. Something stirs beyond the trees. We must be ready." Suddenly, a cry pierced the air. A scout ran toward them, breathless. "Something's moving in the forest." Many shadows, too many to count. The villagers scrambled to their positions, lighting torches and raising their weapons. Favor stood at the center, rallying them. "We hold the line. No matter what comes, we stand together." The shadows crept closer, their forms twisting unnaturally. The battle was about to begin. The forest erupted with movement as dark figures poured from the trees. The villagers gripped their weapons tightly, torches casting long streaks of light across the clearing. Favor's voice rang out. "Hold your ground. We do not break." Arrows whistled through the air, striking the shadows. The creatures hissed and recoiled but kept advancing. Zena scattered her herbs into the fire, causing the flames to roar higher, driving back the darkness momentarily. Mama Esther stood at the center, chanting words of protection. Her staff glowed brighter, forming a circle of light around the baobab tree. "Stand within the light. It will not fail us," she cried. Favor led a charge, her spear glowing faintly. She fought fiercely, striking down shadows as they surged forward. The air buzzed with energy as the villagers fought for their home. The air grew heavier as the villagers sensed a looming threat. The baobab tree stood tall, its branches swaying in the wind as if whispering secrets to those who would listen. Favor stood at its base, her fingers tracing the ancient carvings along its bark. The carvings seemed to glow faintly under her touch, as though the tree itself was alive with anticipation. Mama Esther approached with her staff. "The spirits grow restless," she said. "Change is coming. We must be ready. This is no ordinary night." Zena arrived moments later, clutching a bundle of herbs tied with red string. "The fires are lit, but something stirs in the forest. The shadows are moving again. I saw shapes slipping through the trees, watching. That night, the village prepared for battle. Warriors sharpened their spears, and the women gathered water and herbs for healing. Children were led into huts reinforced with stones and prayer symbols, guarded by elders. Favor and Xena walked the perimeter, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. Suddenly, a distant howl broke the silence. The villagers froze. "They're here," Favor said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. Shadows poured from the trees, their shapes twisting unnaturally. The villagers raised their weapons, torches blazing. Favor led the charge, her spear glowing faintly in the firelight. The battle was fierce. Mama Esther stood at the Baobab's base, chanting words of protection as the tree's roots seemed to pulse with energy. Xena scattered herbs into the flames, sending smoke curling into the air. The shadows recoiled, but more kept coming. Favor's voice rang out. "Hold the line. Fight for your home." The villagers pushed back against the shadows, but the attackers seemed endless. Sweat poured down Favor's face as she cut through the darkness, her spear lighting the way. Xena shouted warnings, directing the wounded to the healers while throwing handfuls of herbs to ward off the spirits. Amid the chaos, Favor spotted a figure cloaked in shadow, directing the attack. It stood tall, its face obscured, but its presence filled the air with dread. She fought her way through the fray, determination blazing in her eyes. "You will not take this village," she cried, thrusting her spear at the figure. The shadow let out a shriek and lunged. Favor barely dodged its strike, rolling to the side and driving her weapon into its form. The figure writhed, and dark tendrils burst outward, lashing at the villagers. Mama Esther's chanting grew louder, and the Baobab tree glowed with golden light. The shadows screamed as beams of light burst from the Baobab, pushing them back into the forest. Silence fell, broken only by the villagers' heavy breaths. Mama Esther raised her staff. "We have won this battle, but the war is far from over. The spirits have given us strength, but we must remain vigilant. The shadows will not rest." The villagers gathered around the tree, their faces lit by hope and exhaustion. Many bore wounds and scars, but their eyes shone with determination. Xena knelt by the fire, adding more herbs to keep the flames strong. Favor looked to Xena. "This is only the beginning," she said. "But together, we will face whatever comes next. And next time, we will be even stronger." The villagers cheered softly, their voices carried by the night wind. The Baobab's leaves rustled, and the light faded back into its roots, leaving behind a lingering warmth, a promise of protection as long as they stood united. The village rebuilt tirelessly, but the scars lingered, etched into the hearts of those who had faced the shadows. Favor led scouting parties, pushing deeper into the forest each day. The woods felt heavier, darker. Branches seemed to whisper as the wind passed through them, and strange tracks often led to dead ends. Still, Favor pressed on, determined to keep the village safe. Xena replenished herbs, her hands moving swiftly to grind roots and mix pastes. Yet, the plants wilted faster than she could harvest them, and the soil grew dry despite the rains. "The land is sick," she muttered one evening, staring at the withering leaves. "It's as if it remembers the darkness." Mama Esther spent hours in prayer beneath the Baobab, her chants growing louder as her visions darkened. She saw glimpses of shadowy figures rising again, their shapes shifting and blending with the night. One evening, as she finished her prayers, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the fires and rattling the branches above. "The spirits stir," she said gravely, addressing the gathering villagers. "This peace is fragile. The darkness is not gone. It waits." The villagers shuddered but stood firm. Favor spoke, her voice steady. "We fought before and we won. We will face whatever comes next with the same strength. But we must be prepared. Keep the fires burning. Guard the walls. The shadows may test us, but they will not break us." That night, the fires burned brighter, and the Baobab tree seemed to hum softly, its roots pulsing with unseen energy. The villagers huddled close, singing songs of hope as they sharpened their weapons and reinforced their defenses. Fear lingered, but so did determination. Favor led another scouting party at dawn, this time venturing farther than ever before. They found signs of movement, ashes of burnt fires and broken branches. "They're regrouping," she said. "We're not done yet." Xena stayed behind, mixing stronger potions and charms to ward off evil. She strung herbs and beads along the paths, whispering blessings into each knot. Mama Esther prepared sacred markings, painting symbols on the villagers' doors to keep the spirits at bay. Despite their preparations, the whispers in the wind grew louder, carrying echoes of warnings. The village braced itself, knowing the trials were far from over. Yet, united and resilient, they stood ready to face the darkness again. The sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the village as preparations continued. The Baobab tree stood tall, its roots humming faintly, but the villagers couldn't shake the feeling that something stirred beneath the earth. The air grew heavy, thick with tension, and even the wind seemed to carry whispers of warning. Favor stood at the edge of the clearing, her spear balanced firmly in her grip. Her eyes scanned the horizon, catching fleeting glimpses of movement among the trees. Xena knelt nearby, mixing powders and herbs into pouches meant for protection. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied each bundle, but her voice remained steady. "The shadows may have retreated, but they're watching," Xena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel them. It's like they're waiting." "I feel it too," Favor replied, scanning the treeline. "It's like the calm before the storm, and storms always break." Mama Esther stepped into the clearing, her staff glowing faintly, the carved symbols on its surface pulsing with a soft light. "Gather the elders. The spirits have spoken again," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "We must not delay." The villagers assembled beneath the Baobab, their faces tight with worry. Mama Esther raised her staff, her voice ringing out over the crowd. "The spirits warn of betrayal from within. Trust must be guarded and unity preserved. Darkness feeds on division, and it will use fear to break us. Do not let it take root." A murmur ran through the crowd. Favor stepped forward, her voice cutting through the unease. "We will stand together," she said firmly, "but we cannot ignore the warnings. We must stay vigilant and face this as one people. Fear cannot divide us." The following days brought growing unease. Scouts returned with reports of footprints circling the outskirts of the village. Fires smoldered in the distance, and strange symbols were carved into the trees, resembling markings seen during earlier battles. The villagers worked day and night, fortifying barriers and sharpening weapons, but exhaustion wore on their spirits. Xena discovered her herbs tainted, their leaves blackened and brittle. "Something is poisoning the land," she said, holding up the ruined plants. "This is no ordinary rot. It feels like it's spreading faster than we can heal." Meanwhile, whispers of distrust began to spread. Villagers cast suspicious glances at newcomers and even each other. Arguments broke out, and suspicion festered like a wound. Favor intervened, gathering the people under the Baobab. "Fear is the weapon of the shadows," she warned. "If we turn against each other, we give them strength. We cannot let that happen. We must fight this as one." One evening, as the villagers patrolled the perimeter, a figure stumbled out of the woods. It was Leo, the man who had once been accused of spying for the shadows. His clothes were torn, and his eyes wild with fear. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath. "I've seen them," he choked out. "They're coming. They've grown stronger. They know about the tree." Mama Esther stepped forward, her staff glowing brighter. "Tell us everything," she said. Leo described a gathering of shadows deeper in the forest, circling a dark pool that seemed to pulse with life. "They spoke of the Baobab, of its power. They mean to take it, to corrupt it. If they succeed, they will spread beyond this village." The villagers braced themselves, tension thick in the air. Favor turned to Xena and Mama Esther. "Then we make our stand here. We protect the Baobab at all costs. If it falls, so do we." The fires were lit, and the villagers armed themselves. Mama Esther painted protective symbols along the borders, while Zena reinforced the charms hanging in the trees. Warriors lined the perimeter, their weapons gleaming in the flickering light. As night fell, a low hum resonated from the Baobab tree, its branches swaying even without wind. The villagers gathered in a tight circle, their voices rising in songs of courage. The air grew colder, and shadows danced at the edges of the firelight. Favor stood at the forefront, her spear glowing faintly in the firelight. "This is not the end," she said, her voice steady. "It's just the beginning of another battle, and we will not falter." The village buzzed with tension as the days dragged on. Smoke still lingered from the fires lit to keep the shadows at bay, and the scent of burning herbs clung to the air. The Baobab tree, though steady, seemed to pulse with energy as if bracing for what was to come. Favor stood at the perimeter, her eyes fixed on the dark forest. The night was unusually quiet, broken only by the crackling of flames. Zena approached, carrying a bundle of charms and protective herbs. "The wind feels wrong tonight," she whispered. "It's too still." Mama Esther appeared beside them, her staff glowing faintly. "The spirits are restless," she said. "They sense what we cannot yet see. We must fortify our hearts and our walls. The shadows are waiting for us to falter." The villagers worked through the night, strengthening the barriers and redrawing protective symbols along the borders. Children whispered prayers as they clung to their parents, and warriors stood in silence, sharpening their spears. As dawn approached, scouts returned with grim news. The shadows had been sighted just beyond the farthest clearing, their forms shifting like smoke. They had carved new symbols into the trees, symbols that mirrored the markings burned into the earth around the Baobab. "They're closing in," Favor said, her voice steady but heavy. "They're preparing. So must we." Mama Esther called the villagers to the tree, raising her staff high. "Today we do not fear. Today we fight. The spirits will guide us, but our strength will hold the line. Stand together and we will not fall." The villagers cheered, but their voices carried an edge of desperation. Favor stepped forward. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for those who will come after us. The Baobab has stood for generations. It will stand for many more, but only if we protect it." The sun rose, painting the sky gold, but it could not dispel the heavy shadows lingering at the edges of the forest. Favor and Zena prepared healing pouches, distributing them among the fighters. Mama Esther etched deeper symbols into the earth, calling upon the spirits for protection. By midday, the earth trembled. Dark figures emerged from the forest, their shapes twisting and pulsing as they moved. The villagers formed a line, their torches raised high. "Hold the line," Favor shouted, her spear glowing as she stepped to the front. "For the Baobab, for Anara." The battle began with a roar as the shadows surged forward. Favor's spear struck the first creature, light erupting from its tip. Zena scattered herbs into the fire, creating a barrier of smoke and flame. Mama Esther's chants echoed, weaving a protective circle around the Baobab. Despite their efforts, the shadows pushed harder, their claws tearing through defenses. Favor fought fiercely, her movements sharp and precise. Zena moved quickly between the injured, her potions and herbs restoring strength and calming fear. The villagers held their ground, their courage burning as fiercely as the flames around them. As the sun dipped low, the shadows began to retreat, leaving behind trails of smoke and ash. Favor lowered her spear, her breath heavy. "This is not their end," she said, turning to Zena. "But it is not ours either." Mama Esther placed a hand on her shoulder. "The spirits are with us, and so is hope." The villagers worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused by the last attack. Charred wood and broken fences were replaced, and new symbols were carved into the earth to strengthen their defenses. Yet, even as the village seemed to recover, the air grew heavier, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. Favor stood at the edge of the clearing, her spear resting at her side. Zena approached, her hands stained with herbs and ash. "The soil is weak," Zena said, kneeling to examine the ground. The roots of the baobab are strong, but the land around it feels hollow. It's as if something beneath us stirs. Mama Esther joined them, her staff glowing faintly. The spirits whisper of something older than the shadows, something buried beneath us. The battle above is not the only one we must fight. The villagers gathered under the baobab tree as Mama Esther called for silence. We have faced the shadows, but now we must face the earth itself. The roots of the baobab stretch deep, and so does the darkness that seeks to rise. We cannot stand divided. Every hand, every heart must be ready. That night, the ground trembled again, this time stronger. Cracks appeared near the tree's roots, and a low hum resonated from below. Favor led a group to investigate, finding a cavern beneath the tree's base. The walls pulsed with faint light, and the markings on the stone mirrored the symbols etched by the shadows. "This is no ordinary place," Favor whispered. "It's ancient, older than the baobab itself." Zena stepped forward, placing her hands on the stones. "It feels alive," she said, "but it's sleeping or waiting." Mama Esther placed her staff at the entrance. "We must seal this place. Whatever lies within cannot rise. The baobab protects us, but we must protect it in return." The villagers worked through the night, sealing the cavern's entrance with stone and symbols. Mama Esther led prayers, and Zena scattered herbs and charms. Favor stood guard, her spear glowing faintly as the shadows gathered at the edges of the clearing but did not cross. As dawn broke, the tremors subsided, and the air felt lighter. Yet Favor could not shake the feeling that the battle had only begun. She turned to Zena and Mama Esther. "We have stopped it for now, but we must stay ready. The earth remembers, and so do the shadows." Mama Esther nodded. "Then we prepare for what's to come. The spirits have guided us this far. They will not abandon us now." The village stirred uneasily in the days that followed. Though the entrance to the cavern beneath the baobab had been sealed, a lingering unease hung in the air. Favor walked the perimeter each morning, her spear never far from reach. The villagers had grown quieter, their laughter subdued, their voices softer, as though afraid to disturb something that slept beneath their feet. Zena worked tirelessly, replenishing protective charms and preparing new potions. But even as she mixed herbs, she felt the strain of the past battles weighing on her. "The herbs are losing their potency faster than before," she confided in Mama Esther. "The earth feels weaker." Mama Esther nodded, her eyes clouded with worry. "It is not just the herbs. The spirits whisper that the darkness is adapting, finding new ways to spread. We cannot rely only on what we have done before. We must listen closely and act wisely." That night, the earth trembled again. Favor rushed to the baobab and pressed her palm against its bark. "It's waking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the clearing as part of the sealed cavern entrance crumbled. Light pulsed from below, casting strange shadows against the trees. The villagers gathered quickly, torches raised and weapons drawn. "Stay back," Favor ordered, stepping closer to the broken seal. She could feel the heat radiating from the stones and the faint hum of energy beneath her feet. Zena stepped forward, holding a bowl of herbs and a lit flame. "We can't leave it open. If we do, it will spread." Mama Esther raised her staff, chanting words of protection. The light from the baobab tree flickered and grew brighter, casting a shield over the clearing. But as the villagers worked to reseal the entrance, shadows began to emerge from the trees, drawn by the energy. "They've found it," Zena whispered, her voice trembling. Favor gripped her spear. "Then we make sure they don't take it." The villagers formed a circle around the tree, their torches blazing as the shadows drew closer. Mama Esther's chanting grew louder, and Zena scattered her herbs, creating a line of fire that slowed the advance. The battle was swift but fierce. Favor moved with precision, her spear glowing as it struck down the shadowed figures. Zena moved among the villagers, tending to wounds and throwing herbs into the flames to strengthen the barrier. Mama Esther stood firm, her staff glowing brighter with each word of her prayers. As the last shadow dissolved into smoke, the ground grew still, and the light beneath the baobab dimmed. Favor lowered her spear, breathing heavily. "This is only the beginning," she said. "The seal won't hold forever. We need to find a way to end this before it rises again." Mama Esther placed a hand on her shoulder. "The answers we seek may lie beneath the roots, but first we must be prepared for what we might find." The morning after the battle, the village awoke to an unsettling calm. The baobab tree stood tall, but its leaves drooped slightly, and the ground near its roots was cracked and dry. Favor knelt beside the fissures, running her fingers over the jagged edges. "It's spreading," she said, looking up at Mama Esther. "The earth is crying out. We sealed the cavern, but something is pushing to get out." Zena approached, holding a bundle of fresh herbs. "I've strengthened the charms, but I can't keep this energy contained. It's growing stronger." Mama Esther planted her staff firmly into the soil. "We need to find its source. The cavern was only the surface. Whatever lies beneath is waking up." The villagers prepared for another journey. Favor led a group of warriors while Zena packed potions and tools. Mama Esther remained at the baobab, chanting prayers and reinforcing the boundaries. The forest grew darker as the group ventured farther. The trees seemed to close in, their branches twisting unnaturally. Shadows danced along the edges of their vision, but none dared to attack. They reached a clearing where the ground had caved in, revealing another entrance to the underground chamber. Unlike before, this one was wide open, pulsing with a faint red glow. "This is it," Favor said, gripping her spear. "Whatever we face down there, we end it." The group descended into the cavern, the air thick with heat and whispers. Symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly as they passed. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, its surface cracked and glowing. Zena stepped forward cautiously. "It's a conduit," she said. "This is where the shadows draw their strength. We have to destroy it." Before they could act, dark figures emerged from the walls, their forms twisting and shifting. Favor raised her spear. "Defend the altar. Don't let them reach it." The chamber erupted into chaos. Favor fought with precision, her spear cutting through the shadows as Zena poured salt and herbs into the cracks, sealing the energy flow. The warriors held the line, but the shadows pushed harder. Suddenly, Mama Esther's voice echoed through the cavern. Her chants carried strength, and the walls vibrated with energy. Light burst from the altar, shattering the shadows and throwing them back. As the dust settled, the altar cracked further, its glow fading. Favor collapsed to her knees, exhausted. "Is it over?" she asked. Zena knelt beside her. "For now," she said, "but the earth still trembles. We've weakened it, but we haven't destroyed it completely." Mama Esther appeared at the entrance, her face solemn. "We've delayed the darkness, but its roots run deeper than we thought. We must dig further, to the heart of the shadows." The dust had barely settled in the cavern when Favor noticed faint tremors beneath her feet. The villagers were exhausted, but there was no time to rest. Mama Esther gathered them at the baobab tree and said, "The shadows retreat, but their whispers remain. They are watching, waiting for us to falter. We cannot let our guard down." Favor took charge, leading scouts deeper into the forest to investigate the cracks that continued to form. The ground was unstable, and strange markings appeared on stones near the cavern's edges. Zena collected samples of soil and plants, noting the decay spreading outward from the cavern. "The earth is poisoned," Zena said grimly. "It's feeding the shadows. We need to stop it at the source." That night, as the villagers gathered around the fire, a distant howl echoed through the forest. Favor stood, her spear ready. "They're coming back," she said. "But this time we won't wait for them to attack. We'll meet them head-on." The next morning, Favor and her warriors ventured toward the cavern, leaving Zena and Mama Esther to fortify the village. The deeper they went, the darker the forest became. Roots twisted unnaturally, and the air grew heavier with each step. They reached the cavern, but it had changed. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and the glow from the altar had returned, stronger than before. "It's rebuilding itself," Favor said, stepping closer. "We didn't destroy it. We only slowed it down." Suddenly, shadows emerged from the walls, surrounding the group. The warriors fought fiercely, but the shadows seemed endless, feeding off the altar's power. Favor shouted, "Xena, now!" Back at the village, Xena and Mama Esther began their ritual, pouring sacred herbs into the flames and chanting ancient words. The ground trembled as light shot through the cracks, spreading toward the cavern. Inside the cavern, the shadows screamed as beams of light pierced them. Favor struck the altar with her spear, shattering its surface. The energy burst outward, knocking everyone to the ground. When the light faded, the shadows were gone, but the cavern was collapsing. "We have to get out," Favor shouted, pulling her warriors toward the entrance. They emerged into the daylight as the ground caved in behind them. Xena ran to meet them, relief flooding her face. "Is it over?" she asked. Mama Esther shook her head. "Not yet. The shadows are weakened, but their roots still linger. We've cut one vine, but the tree of darkness has many branches." She turned to Favor. "We must be ready for what comes next." The village awoke to gray skies and a sharp wind that carried whispers of unease. The Baobab tree stood firm, but its leaves rustled as if trying to warn them of something unseen. Favor stood at its base, her spear in hand, as Mama Esther approached. "The earth is restless again," Mama Esther said, her voice strained. "The shadows may be weakened, but they are not gone." Xena arrived with a basket of herbs, her hands trembling slightly. "The soil feels empty," she said. "The roots of the baobab are still strong, but the earth around them is hollowing out. It's as if something is draining it." Favor turned to the villagers gathered nearby. "We cannot wait for the shadows to come to us again. We must take the fight to them." Under Mama Esther's guidance, the villagers prepared for the journey. Warriors sharpened their weapons, and Xena created potions and charms for protection. Favor selected the strongest fighters to accompany her into the depths of the forest. The group moved cautiously, their path lit by torches. The forest grew darker the farther they ventured, and the ground beneath them trembled. Suddenly, the earth cracked open, revealing another cavern glowing faintly with red light. "It's another altar," Xena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The shadows are rebuilding their strength." Before they could react, figures emerged from the cavern, their forms darker and more solid than before. The warriors formed a line, shields raised and spears ready. "Hold the line," Favor shouted as the shadows surged forward. The battle was fierce, with the villagers fighting desperately to push the darkness back. Xena threw herbs into the flames, creating bursts of light that burned the shadows, while Mama Esther chanted, her staff glowing brightly. Favor fought her way to the altar, her spear glowing with energy. She struck it, sending cracks through its surface. But this time, the altar resisted, sending a shockwave that knocked her back. "It's stronger," Xena cried. "We need more time." Mama Esther raised her staff, calling upon the spirits. The ground trembled, and roots burst from the earth, wrapping around the altar. "Now, Favor," she shouted. Favor lunged, driving her spear into the altar. Light exploded outward, shattering the structure and forcing the shadows to retreat. The ground shook violently, and the villagers scrambled to escape as the cavern collapsed behind them. Outside, the villagers gathered around the baobab tree, their faces filled with relief but also fear. "It's not over," Mama Esther said. "This was only a piece of the darkness. Its roots still run deep. But tonight, we have proven that light can push back the shadows." Favor gripped her spear and looked toward the horizon. "Then we keep fighting," she said. "For the baobab, for Anara, and for the light." The morning after the last battle, the village stirred with tension. The baobab tree, though standing tall, seemed weighed down by the burden of the struggles it had endured. Favor stood at its base, her spear in hand, scanning the horizon. The air was thick, and the wind whispered warnings. Mama Esther approached, her staff tapping against the earth. "The spirits are restless," she said. "The light we unleashed has held the shadows at bay, but I fear the roots of darkness still hunger beneath us." Xena joined them, carrying bowls of herbs and ash. "The soil hasn't healed," she said. "I've tried every mixture I know, but the earth refuses to settle. Whatever lies beneath is still feeding." Favor turned to the villagers. "We've faced the darkness before, and we will face it again," she said firmly. "But this time we must go deeper. The answers we need are no longer above ground. We must descend." The villagers prepared for another journey. Mama Esther blessed each warrior, marking their foreheads with ash. Xena mixed potions to protect against the shadows, and Favor led a small group toward the cavern's edge, where the ground had cracked open once more. They descended carefully, torches lighting the path. The walls pulsed with faint light, and the air grew heavy the deeper they went. Strange carvings lined the walls, older than any markings they had seen before. "This isn't just a cave," Xena whispered. "It's a passage, one the shadows have walked for centuries." At the bottom, they found a massive chamber. In its center stood a stone pedestal, cracked and glowing faintly. Mama Esther stepped forward, raising her staff. "This is the source," she said. "The shadows draw their strength from here." Suddenly, dark tendrils burst from the walls, wrapping around the pedestal. Favor raised her spear and lunged, striking at the shadows. The chamber erupted with energy, and the ground began to tremble. "It's waking up," Xena shouted. "We need to destroy it before it's too late." Mama Esther chanted, her voice echoing through the cavern. Light poured from her staff, pushing back the tendrils. Favor struck the pedestal again, this time shattering its surface. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, but the cavern began to collapse. "Move!" Favor yelled, leading the group toward the exit. Stones fell around them as they scrambled to escape. They emerged into the daylight, gasping for air. The ground rumbled one last time before growing still. Mama Esther looked back at the sealed entrance. "We've cut off their source," she said, "but the shadows are never truly gone. We must guard the Baobab always." Favor gripped her spear, her gaze steady. "Then we stand ready," she said, "for the light, for Anara, and for every generation to come." The morning sun bathed the village in gold, but the air remained thick with unease. Favor stood at the edge of the clearing, her spear glinting in the light. The baobab tree loomed behind her, its branches swaying gently as if murmuring secrets to the wind. Xena emerged from her hut carrying bundles of herbs and charms. "The earth has calmed, but the silence feels wrong," she said softly. Mama Esther approached, her staff tapping the ground with each step. "The spirits are watchful," she said. "The shadows may have retreated, but something stirs in their absence." Favor tightened her grip on her spear. "We've sealed the caverns, but we cannot seal fear. It lingers, it festers." She turned to the villagers gathering near the tree. "We must strengthen our hearts as much as our walls. Fear feeds the darkness. Hope will starve it." That night, the villagers lit fires and gathered under the baobab. Mama Esther led chants, and Xena scattered protective herbs into the flames. Favor walked among them, speaking words of courage and unity. As the fires burned, a sudden gust of wind extinguished one of the flames. The villagers gasped, and Favor turned sharply. "Stay together," she commanded. The shadows did not appear, but the ground trembled faintly, as if warning them of something beneath. Mama Esther stepped forward, raising her staff. "We cannot let fear divide us," she said. "Let the light of our unity push back the darkness." The villagers raised their torches, and the fire blazed anew. But as the flames danced, Xena noticed faint cracks forming near the roots of the baobab. "It's not over," she whispered. Over the next few days, Favor and her warriors scouted the forest, finding strange symbols etched into the bark of trees and stones. The markings glowed faintly at night, and Xena warned they carried traces of shadow magic. They're testing us, Zena said, waiting for us to falter. Favor called the villagers together. We won't give them that chance, she declared. We will face whatever comes. Together, Mama Esther prepared new rituals, and Zena reinforced the protective charms. Favor led patrols, her spear ever ready. The Baobab tree stood tall, its whispers stronger, as though guiding them through the trials ahead. One evening, as Favor stood guard, she felt a shift in the air. The shadows had not returned, but something else approached, something older, deeper. She gripped her spear, her heart steady. Whatever it is, she said softly, we'll be ready. The wind carried whispers of change as the villagers continued their preparations. Though the baobab stood strong, its roots seemed to groan beneath the weight of unseen forces. Favor paced the clearing, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. Zena emerged from her hut, holding a bowl of smoldering herbs. The flames are restless, she said. The spirits are warning us to stay vigilant. Mama Esther joined them, her staff glowing faintly. The earth speaks in tremors, and the sky grows heavy. The shadows may not return as we expect them. We must be ready for what the spirits cannot yet name. That night, the villagers gathered once more around the fires. Mama Esther led prayers, and Zena scattered protective herbs, but the flames flickered unevenly, struggling to stay alive. They're testing us, Favor said, watching, waiting for us to falter. The next day, strange footprints were found at the edge of the forest, deeper and sharper than any they had seen before. Favor examined them closely. These are not the same shadows, she said. This is something new. Mama Esther placed her staff in the ground. New or old, it will fall before the light. We must face this darkness head-on. The villagers fortified their defenses. Zena wove protective charms into the trees, and the warriors trained under Favor's watchful eye. Each night, the fires burned brighter, but the shadows drew closer, inching toward the village. On the third night, a deep growl echoed through the forest. The villagers froze, and Favor stepped forward, her spear raised. "Show yourself," she shouted. The trees parted, revealing a figure cloaked in black smoke. It towered over the clearing, its eyes burning red. The villagers backed away, but Favor held her ground. "You cannot have this village," she declared, her voice steady. The creature raised its arms, and the ground trembled. Mama Esther began to chant, and Zena threw herbs into the fire, creating a wall of smoke and flame. The creature roared but did not retreat. "Hold the line," Favor shouted, stepping closer. "We fight as one." The battle began. The villagers fought with courage, their torches blazing and spears flashing. Zena moved swiftly, healing the wounded and strengthening their defenses. Mama Esther's voice rang out, her chants pushing back the darkness. Favor faced the creature, her spear glowing with light. "You will not take this land," she cried, striking at its core. The creature howled, its form unraveling into smoke. The villagers cheered, but Mama Esther raised her hand. "This was only the first," she said. "The storm is not over. The shadows have awakened something greater." Favor stood tall, her spear still glowing. "Then we face it together," she said. "For the Baobab, for Anara, and for the light." The fires in the village burned brighter than ever, but so did the tension that hung in the air. The shadows were gone, but their whispers lingered. Favor stood near the Baobab tree, her spear resting beside her, watching the horizon. Mama Esther stepped forward, her staff glowing faintly. "The spirits are restless," she said. "They whisper of trials yet to come. The light has held them back, but only for now." Zena approached with a basket of herbs. "The land is still weak," she said. "Its wounds will not heal if the darkness keeps feeding beneath it. We need to strengthen the soil and the people." Favor nodded. "Then we keep preparing. We can't be caught off guard." That night, the villagers gathered once more around the fires. Mama Esther's chants filled the air, and Zena distributed charms and powders to fortify their defenses. Warriors stood guard, their torches blazing, as Favor walked the perimeter, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the earth. Cracks formed near the roots of the Baobab tree, and a gust of wind snuffed out the fires. The villagers froze. "Light the flames again," Favor shouted, raising her spear. "Stay together." The fires roared back to life, but the cracks widened, and from the earth, dark tendrils began to rise. Mama Esther planted her staff in the ground, chanting louder as the tendrils writhed and reached for the villagers. "They've returned," Zena cried, throwing herbs into the fire. Smoke billowed, creating a barrier that slowed the tendrils' advance. Favor charged, her spear glowing as she struck the tendrils, severing them one by one. The villagers followed her lead, their weapons cutting through the darkness. Mama Esther's voice rang out, calling upon the spirits. The Baobab tree glowed, its roots pushing back against the tendrils. The earth shook violently, and the tendrils retreated into the cracks, leaving the clearing silent but scarred. Zena knelt by the cracks, pressing her hands into the soil. "The darkness is still beneath us," she said. "We pushed it back, but we didn't stop it." Mama Esther leaned heavily on her staff. "We have weakened it, but it will return, and next time it may rise stronger." Favor turned to the villagers. "Then we must be stronger too," she said. "We will guard this tree and this village with everything we have. The light will not fail us." The villagers cheered, but Favor's eyes remained on the cracks. The Baobab stood tall, its roots glowing faintly, but she knew the battle was far from over. The flames might have risen, but so had the darkness, and the fight for Anara had only just begun. The Baobab tree loomed in the center of the village, its branches stretching wide as though shielding the people of Anara. Favor stood at its base, her spear planted firmly in the earth. The villagers gathered around, their faces alight with determination and fear. It was the eve of the final battle. Mama Esther stepped forward, her staff glowing faintly. "The spirits have shown me visions of what is to come. Darkness rises not just from below but from within. We must face this night as one people, united and unbroken." Zena scattered herbs into the fires, her voice steady as she called upon the spirits of healing and protection. "The land remembers our strength," she said. "Let it remember our victory." The ground trembled, and a dark mist seeped from the cracks near the Baobab's roots. Shadowy figures rose from the earth, their forms twisting unnaturally. Favor raised her spear, the tip glowing faintly. "Hold the line. Protect the tree." The battle erupted. Warriors clashed with the shadows, torches and spears cutting through the darkness. Zena moved swiftly, tending to the wounded and throwing powders into the flames to keep the barrier intact. Mama Esther stood beneath the tree, her chants weaving through the chaos, her staff glowing brighter with each word. Favor fought her way to the largest shadow, its form towering over the others. She lunged, but it deflected her strike with tendrils of smoke. "You cannot defeat what you cannot see," it hissed. Favor gritted her teeth. "But I can face what I fear." She struck again, this time piercing its core. Light burst outward, pushing back the shadows. The earth shook violently. The Baobab's roots glowed golden, spreading light through the cracks. Mama Esther's voice rang out. "Now, Favor, finish it." Favor raised her spear high and drove it into the earth. The light exploded, consuming the shadows. The ground steadied, and silence fell. The villagers cheered, but Favor sank to her knees, her chest heaving. Mama Esther placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have done what many feared impossible. You faced the darkness and brought back the light." Zena knelt beside her. "The land will heal now," she said, "and so will we." The Baobab tree shimmered, its roots pulsing gently as if breathing. Favor rose, looking at the villagers. "The fight is over, but our watch never ends. The light must always be guarded." And so the village of Anara thrived. The Baobab stood as a symbol of resilience, its branches whispering stories to the wind. Favor's name became legend, not as a warrior, but as the keeper of stories, reminders of courage, unity, and hope. As the night falls and the stars take their place in the heavens, may the light of hope and courage remain in our hearts. May the whispers of the Baobab tree remind us of strength, unity, and the power of faith. May the spirits of peace watch over us, guarding our dreams and blessing our rest. And as we close our eyes, may we find comfort in the knowledge that light always triumphs over darkness. Good night, and may your soul be wrapped in the gentle embrace of calm and protection until the dawn greets you with new beginnings.